So welcome everybody to Small Charity, Big Loyalty. So we're going to start with an introduction really to what's happening with small charities, some of the challenges faced by small charities, and some of the priorities and opportunities. And that's going to be led by Alex Farrow, who is Director of Influencing and Engagement at NCVO. Thank you very much, Alex. Obviously, this is all part of Small Charity Week as well. So we're here doing our very best to bring content, value, ideas to help small charities. So it's all part of that Small Charity Week umbrella. So thank you, Alex, who's going to do that introduction. Then we're going to hand over to Roger Lawson, who is founder and director at About Loyalty. Roger really likes it when I introduce him, and there's nothing Roger doesn't know about charity supported loyalty. So if you've got this is your opportunity to ask him questions today. We are going to have a chance at questions at the end. So if you've got questions, jot them down or pop them in the Q&A. And what we'll do is we'll collate them, curate them at the end, and you've all got a chance to ask questions. So yeah, by all means, everybody is game to be asked questions. So ask Alex, ask Roger, and our third speaker, Ollie Ducrot he's the Marketing and Communications Manager at International Nepal Fellowship. And he's going to be talking about how he's worked, how he's working at INF to grow support and the role that loyalty can play in that. We're then going to hand back to Roger, who's going to talk about a very specific service which we've put together really to help small charities make the most of all of the work that we're going to be going through today. So that's all fantastic. So just to quickly say that Ollie and International Nepal Fellowship have been part of a pilot that we've run for small charities over the first half of this year. There have been 5 charities there, and Amy from About Loyalty, Amy Hipsley, she's been project managing that overall piece of work, that pioneering pilot. So we're all kind of here together, excited about what we can do to help small charities, and in a really kind of timely and appropriate way. So this is our gift to you for Small Charities Week. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Alex Farrow, Director of Influencing and Engagement at NCVO, to give us a bit of an introduction, background, context for small charity and big loyalty. So thanks very much, Alex.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Richard. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Alex. I am Director of Influencing and Engagement at NCVO. For those who don't know, NCVO is the National Council for Voluntary Organisations, and we are the membership body for charities across England. And my job is a couple of things, but primarily it's about making sure that our members at NCVO have the support that they need and a brilliant experience. But also it's about making sure that government particularly are providing the kind of support that's needed to help charities and volunteers be able to kind of do the things that they are doing brilliantly. And that also we are amplifying the voices of members from across the country to decision makers where it makes a difference. So it's brilliant and a real privilege to be here this week and to be with you midway through Small Charity Week 2023. Small Charity Week is an annual celebration of small charities and the work that they do in communities up and down the country. But it's not just about celebrating what they do. It's also about making it a campaign to make sure that people are aware of the work of small charities, but also to make sure that they're getting the support that they need to be able to kind of often do very vital things in communities, particularly for some of the most difficult contexts and circumstances across the country. Small charities to us are organisations that have a turnover of less than £1 million per year. And there are 170,000 charities across the country, voluntary organisations across the country. 96% of them have a turnover of less than £1 million. So the vast majority of charities, whenever we talk about charities, we are really talking about small organisations. But of course, within that 1 million turnover, there's enormous variation. So at NCVO, actually, 2/3 of our own membership actually have a turnover of less than £30,000 per year. So within small, actually there's enormous diversity about what those organizations are doing, whether they have paid staff, whether they're working primarily with volunteers, and the kind of some of the challenges that they might be facing. So at the larger end, you probably have a pretty reasonable sized staff team, but at the smallest end, under £30,000 per year, it is probably just really good people coming together on their street, in their town, in their neighborhood, coming together to solve a problem or to kind of make the most of an opportunity that exists for them. It has never been more important for us to be highlighting the work of small charities and, of course, charities more broadly. Charities have been on the kind of front line of cost of living crises and, of course, the energy crises through the winter, straight off the back of supporting communities through COVID, and, of course, through many of the other challenges that they were already supporting people with. Small charities now are facing, if you run a building, if you have staff, if you buy things, if you run services, if you're buying goods to support people, everything is significantly more expensive this year than it was last year. Coupled with the challenge of fewer people giving to charity, and when they are giving, they're giving smaller amounts. And of course, because of inflation, when they are still giving that £10 or £20 direct debit, the value of that amount of money has, of course, gone down. So we know that charities and voluntary organisations, particularly those that are small, are facing a real crunch, not just then in how much money they've got, particularly got coming in, the costs are rising, and we've seen demand, a tide of demand that has surged, particularly as households and communities have faced real challenge through the winter. There were challenges, and I can talk a little bit in a moment about what we at NCVO have been doing to kind of support that. But I also always want to mention at this point that actually charities and particularly small organisations also exist to make our communities brilliant and fun and enjoyable places to live, to work, to grow up, to grow old, and to live. And so yes, it is true that charities also they're providing vital services, but they're also running girl guiding units and scouts and the kind of biggest end. And at the smaller end, they're helping make our parks litter free, or working on the canals, or kind of helping keep run parks or play groups or PTAs. So it's also about the really joyful aspects of communities, as well as some of the really tough stuff that organisations do, of course, as well. At NCVO, we've been focusing our support for small organisations in a number of different areas. So first of all, one of the big things that we've done this year with partners is to make sure that there's money coming from the government to support small organisations. And we were hugely proud and relieved when the Chancellor announced £100 million support for charities in the March budget. And we've been working with government officials to make sure that that's going to be focused on where it's really needed, and that the scheme will be there to support in a really accessible way charities that have been on the front line, but also have faced significant increase in costs. That's coming. At NCVO, if you're a small organisation, we run a help desk that's always there during the day, Monday to Friday, for support. We have a huge amount of practical support content online that's particularly tailored to small organisations. We run a whole series of free events for members and for non-members. And for organisations with less than a turnover of £30,000, NCVO membership is free. So you can access all the benefits of membership while knowing that you don't have to pay a penny for that kind of support. Finally, we have a practical support bulletin that is there to make sure that small organisations are getting the information and the advice and guidance that they need exactly at the point that it's going to be really important, and things that are on their in tray are going to be the kind of things we're talking about in our practical support bulletin. So there are a number of pillars of support that we provide small charities with, as well as then all the other things that organisations get about kind of meeting other organisations, connecting, and being part of the many big events that we have across the year. The last thing that I will say is that whether it's support and loyalty in terms of people who are giving financially to organisations, or whether it's volunteering, people who are kind of volunteering their time to the causes that they care about, the experience of people doing that has never been more important, and particularly when people are forced into making really difficult decisions about which charities are they going to keep supporting as their household budgets are squeezed, or which organizations are they going to keep volunteering for when their time is pressed because of other priorities. People are going to make decisions about that based on the experience that they have and their kind of connection to the organization or the group that they've been donating to or giving their time to. So this webinar, this masterclass, is a really important one for us to think about what does that experience need to look and feel like, and how do we, for those running organizations, how do we make that experience brilliant for everyone all the time, so that we, from an organizational perspective, can retain that line of loyalty. Because ultimately, it's only by doing that that our organizations can deliver for the people that we're there to serve, whether that's in our communities, locally, or kind of around the world. So thank you for having me. Enjoy the whole of Small Charity Week. We're at Wednesday, or if you're watching this on replay, it's already gone. We've already finished probably, but you can watch them all on the Small Charity Week website. But please do check out some of the other events that are coming up throughout the week, and keep celebrating and raising awareness about the vital work of small charities across the country. Richard, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks very much, Alex. Absolutely brilliant. Some really good stats there, and I really appreciate the point you made. Actually, that it's people are going to be making decisions. How do I spend my time? How do I spend my money? And actually, what we really want is to understand how we can maximise, our appeal. How do we ensure that we retain our supporters, that over and above everything else that's happening, we are still forefront of mind, we're still special to them, and they give us their time and money. So thank you. So I'm going to hand over now to founder and director from About Loyalty, Roger Lawson. Well, to answer the question, how do we do that? So over to you, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and massive thank you, Alex. I think there's a real message in there. I think when you ask people externally and you talk to people about charities, obviously for most people, the first ones that come to the mind are the big ones and the cancer charities or the animal charities or the well-known ones. But just the reminder from Alex there that for everybody, just how much of the society that we live in is so dependent on smaller organisations that are just every aspect of the communities we live in is touched by them on there. And I think for me that the thing I heard very loudly there was just of how important it is at the moment. And Alex, you're talking about the crunch that charities are facing, and the crunch of the income is challenged at the moment with the cost of living crisis. That with inflation, every pound you get is worth less than it was even yesterday, and that there's more demand. And also delighted to hear you talk about, and more people in our sector talk about the concept of experience at the moment, and support experience. And that first part of that incomes are being challenged, and that people are having to make decisions, is absolutely the heart of what we really want to talk about for the rest of today. And this concept of loyalty, and the concept of loyalty that people feel to the charities that they support and the organisations that they support. So that's what I'm going to start off with. And this word loyalty really kind of it's one that we use a lot across the sector, and it's right there, isn't it, in terms of what we want to achieve. And we talk about we want loyal supporters, but I think it's really important that we understand what we mean by that. And certainly setting out what we're talking about this afternoon, we want to talk about what our view of loyalty is. And our view of loyalty is that it starts absolutely with the heart of why people support, and at the beginning of that. We know really that why people give is emotional. We know that people give not because they know something or because they understand something, but they give because they care about something, and they care passionately about it. And so if why people give is emotional, then why they keep giving is also emotional. So we talk in the sector about sort of loyal behaviours, and we talk about the number of times people give, or retention and upgrades and things like that. For us, that's not loyalty. That's a behaviour. That's something that people do. It's obviously the thing that we want our supporters to do. We want supporters to keep giving to us over a period of time. But rather than being loyalty in themselves, we think of those things as indicators or a consequence of having high loyalty. No, move a bit fast, 9, 10 to 2. In the same way that lapsing is an indicator of when loyalty is low. And we have a definition that we use that takes you back earlier in the process than counting giving and behaviors, to really the emotions that drive that. And so our definition of loyalty is around that feeling of connection, feeling of support, feeling of allegiance, that then means they want to support going forwards with you. And you can see that the words there, loyalty it's that feeling of support, feeling of connection, feeling of allegiance, and that's absolutely the core of what it is that we think of as loyalty. And when we're talking about loyalty, that's what we're looking at here. So that's great, and that concept, if we understand that's important, how people feel about it is right at the core, at the heart of how they will then engage with us and build relationships with us. But if we're going to be able to successful in growing loyalty, creating big loyalty, then we have to understand what it is that creates loyalty. And this is where our research has really consistently pointed us in the direction of 3 key pillars that need to come together within any supporter for them to feel loyal to the causes and the charities and organizations that they support and are loyal towards. So those 3 drivers, 3 pillars, if you like, of loyalty are the things that you will hear us about loyalty talk about a lot, and they are commitment and satisfaction and trust. So let me just talk very briefly through them. The first of these is commitment. Commitment is the passion that someone feels for you, for the cause, for the thing that you're trying to change, the impact that you're trying to change, the lives that you're trying to improve, make better, the difference you're trying to make in society, the injustices you're trying to put right. Whatever your cause, whatever the difference you're trying to make, it's when the supporter is absolutely passionate about what you're trying to do. And particularly when they feel that what you do is important and that it's important to them whether or not you are successful. When they really believe that what you do is important and they share, if you like, they invest of themselves in whether or not you are successful, that's when they will be really committed to you as an organization and as the organization that they want to support. So that's commitment. It's very much about the difference you're trying to make and for the supporter to feel that it's really important to them that you are able to do that. The second of the pillars is satisfaction. And satisfaction is around the way you communicate with people, how you make them feel as a supporter. It's whether they're happy with the way you communicate with them. It's whether you use the right tone of voice and thank them appropriately and make them feel recognized as a supporter. So we've got that they're passionate about the cause. They're happy with the way you communicate with them. And the third of them is that they trust you to believe that you behave in the right way and that you do what you say you're going to do. So those are the 3 pillars, that they're passionate about the cause, happy with the way you communicate with them, trust you to get on and do it in the right way. Those 3 things come together to create that overall loyalty. And they're the 3 things they're important individually, but when they come together as a whole, that's when you create really loyal supporters that will stay with you ongoing. And for us, that's when we're able to put together and start to understand loyalty and even create a measure of loyalty. And that's very much at the heart of the research that we've done and the research we've done with the charities that we work with. And we can help charities measure commitment, satisfaction and trust and create an overall loyalty score. Well, we've done that now with over 1/3 donors for a range of different organizations, large and small, and created what we call a loyalty score. Not the most imaginative name possibly, but does what it says on the tin. A loyalty score for each one of those 330,000, 340,000 supporters that have completed the surveys for us. And we can see the distribution. For our score, the top is 7. We call them our super 7s. They're the people that absolutely love you. to be a Super 7, the supporters have to strongly agree to a whole range of statements around how they feel about the charity, and basically saying that they love the charity. They love every aspect about you. They're committed to you, they're satisfied with the way they communicate with you, and they trust you. And around 5% of all supporters from our research sort of fit into that category. We can then see the distribution. Now, we're talking about existing supporters of existing charities. So of course we don't have very many people down at the score. It ultimately goes down to 1. Of course we don't have people at the bottom end, because it's a self-selecting group of people that we're talking to. Out of the warm supporter files that we're researching and talking to, on average, the highest sort of distribution is people around 6, high 5s, low 6s, or there's a peak at 6. And we can see straight away there that we've got a whole range of supporters at different points of their sort of loyalty journey with the charities that they support. So we then break them down. So around this 6 is what we term medium loyalty, and then obviously we've got people with higher loyalty than that, and we've got people with lower loyalty than that. And there is actually quite a tail, even amongst warm supporter bases, of people with very low loyalty. And that scoring is really important for us. And I'm going to talk a bit more about scoring later on, and why it's important. But also it is giving a measure for the supporters that we're talking about. For the supporters of the 45 charities that now have taken part in here, and you'll see some big organisations, but you'll also see small organisations, including International Nepal Fellowship, and we're going to hear from Ollie very shortly as well, other small charities in here. But as we see that the score of supporters can at one end is 1 and at the top end is 7. One of the things we're able to do with that, having a score enables us to do, is actually measure the impact of growing loyalty and understand why loyalty, not just what loyalty is, but why it's so important. And what we've been lucky to work with some of the charities that we've just seen, and 50,000 of those supporters, we've been able to track their actual giving, not just intentions to give, but their actual giving over the 3 years following when they completed the surveys. From that, we've been able to calculate the impact of growing loyalty. And a 1-point increase in loyalty, we're able to, stripping out everything else so we can just isolate what the impact of that loyalty is, can grow income by up to 20% more income from those people after 3 years. So we're talking about something that is yes, of course, we want to treat our supporters well and give them the right experience. But there's a very real, going back to the crunch that Alex was talking about, and the fact that income is going to get harder to generate. There's a really important reason why loyalty is so important of supporters, and that's that they give more and they give for longer. And on top of that 20%, that's the thing we're able to measure in terms of the actual support and the actual giving. On top of that, we do ask about intentions. We see that those people with a high loyalty are 9% more likely to say that they intend to leave a gift, and they will as well. So we can see there's a real value there in growing. That's why big loyalty, as we're calling it today, is so important for every single charity and every organisation. So I've talked quite a bit there about measuring loyalty and sort of touched on the methodology we have. I'm going to come back to this in a bit, but I just want to mention that one of the things we're doing today is that we're launching something that we're referring to as Chase Lite. So we've been measuring loyalty of supporters to charities for nearly 10 years now, and mainly larger charities, and that's where we started out. But today we're launching Chase Lite, which is very, very specifically designed for smaller charities. And it's a reduced version, if you like, because we know that there's actually slightly different needs of charities, and particularly obviously different resources available or not available, maybe a better way of phrasing that. So we're delighted we're going to launch that, and I will talk a little bit more about that later on this afternoon. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand back to Richard and then on to Ollie. And Ollie from International Nepal Fellowship is going to talk a little bit about his role. Sorry, the bit I should have said about this is we're delighted and grateful that 5 charities have recently helped pilot this Chase Lite product. So DePaul UK, Embrace the Middle East, International DePaul Fellowship, who you can hear from, the Minds Advisory Group and Age International have all helped pilot this. And Ollie, as one of those pilots, is going to talk a little bit about how it's part of his program to grow loyalty of his supporters. So I'm going to hand back to Richard for the moment, and then you'll hear from me a bit more in a bit.
Brilliant as always, Roger. Thank you so much. I think the only thing I can really do is to just hand back on and say over to you, Ollie. Because I think you've got plenty to tell us about some of the strategic shifts, the changes, and really how important it is to understand, well, exactly as Roger was talking about, how your supporters are feeling, what their relationship is with you. But I'm not going to steal any of your thunder, so I'll hand over to you, Ollie DeCrow, Marketing Communications Manager at International DePaul Fellowship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, as Richard and Roger were saying, my name is Ollie DeCrow. I work as Marketing and Communications Manager at the International DePaul Fellowship. We're a health and development charity focused on remote communities in parts of Nepal where the landscape often looks a bit like it does in this photo. And to ensure that we are relevant to today's event for small charities, I'm glad to say that we do fit the NCBO's description. So our annual income is about 750,000, and whether that meets your description of your definition of a small charity or not may be different. As we've heard, there's a lot of variety in small charities in the UK. We do have a staff team. We've got 7 members of staff, 3 of whom are involved in fundraising. 2 of those are trust fundraisers essentially, and my marketing and communications role is mainly focused on individual giving, but obviously incorporates a lot of different things as required with the nature of working for a smaller organisation. Next slide, please. So to start, just a bit of background about INF, which, as you'll see, is hopefully relevant to today's conversation as well. So we're actually founded in the 1950s as an organisation that sent Christian missionaries to Nepal, mainly to work in healthcare while helping the Nepali church grow. The charity has continued to develop and evolve significantly during the intervening 70 years. And in 2018, INF's trustees decided to stop sending UK-based people to spend time in Nepal. So we now focus on partnering with like-minded Nepali organisations who share our values and deliver the work funded by our supporters. So that means that we now describe ourselves as a health and development charity, helping the most disadvantaged Nepalis, people and communities break free from poverty and suffering. Well, that strategic shift was primarily done to make INF relevant in the 2020s and beyond. And a lot of that was because of ideas around what healthy, locally led international development looks like. The hope was also that we would broaden our appeal and hopefully reach new markets and new donors who may be less motivated by our Christian identity than our traditional supporter base has been over the decades. So that was the plan in 2018. The world has had a few challenges since then, obviously. So the COVID pandemic, subsequent economic meltdown that we've seen have made us reassess what that progress means and what that looks like for us. But we are seeing some green shoots from institutional grants and some new individual donors as well. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I said, we have been making some progress in the time since that kind of strategic decision was taken 4 or 5 years ago. There's been some positive work that's been done to retain donors, minimise attrition, and ensure that as supporters move away from our kind of old model of working and start giving purely to our partners' health and development projects. That's been a key thing that a lot of work has gone into. We've also been making the most of the digital shift that I'm sure lots of you would have seen happening, especially during the pandemic. So we're using email a lot more to drive engagement. We've continued to develop our website to improve online giving and the experience there. And we saw that have a massive impact during sort of COVID emergency appeals, responding to when the pandemic really affected Nepal, and with online giving increasing more than tenfold, fairly instantly during that time. Obviously, doing things like Zoom events with supporters and social media advertising as well, so making us more digitally available to supporters. And alongside that, we've been developing our supporter journeys, which is very much still a work in progress. But some of the things that we've been doing about developing more effective and appropriate thanking, developing that online experience with post-donation web pages, improving the welcome journey for supporters and how we follow through with people on that, and various other aspects. Part of what has helped us on that journey is also that we moved to a new CRM system about 12 months ago. That's opened up some new tools to us. We're now using Beacon for those who are interested, and it's given us better visibility of supporter data. Next slide, please. But we have been left with this question of, do we really know our supporters, especially given the change in strategy from a few years ago? Do what we thought we used to know about our supporters, is that still true? Do we know if our newer donors are still motivated by our faith-based identity or not? And are some of those old INF assumptions that we made about people, are they still accurate? We also wanted to find out, if we could, if people are still as committed as we think they used to be. Are they happy with what INF now is compared to what it might have used to be when they started supporting us? And do they still trust us? Next slide, please. So those are some of the questions. So how do we go about learning that? Well, I'd say one of the big advantages of being a smaller organisation is that we need to make the most of any opportunities to glean qualitative insights from supporters. And sometimes that might feel a bit anecdotal or a bit random, but I just think it's so valuable because you can learn so much from any sort of interaction. So that's making the most of phone calls, emails to people, encouraging feedback. We put in regular communications, often things like, we really love to hear from you, and just encourage any feedback from supporters. As a little story on that, I recently emailed a new donor because we put a story on the website which was relevant to what this person had given to, and I was hoping to find out a bit more in response. And actually her reply gave me various insights, not only on how she'd come across INF, but also about what motivated her giving. So I just think that's really valuable, especially for smaller charities. We're also going to be starting a focus group. We're going to invite a small number of supporters, both long-standing supporters and newer donors as well, which will help us get a bit more additional direct input and feedback. However, we also wanted to get a bit smarter and a bit more data-driven in trying to get some quantitative data. And this is where Chase Lite came into play. And one of our hopes for that as well was because it also has allowed us to benchmark data against how other charities perform, as well as learning how we score on various measurements that we've been given. So on the next slide, you will see what we can now see. So this is just an example of this is the dashboard that we can access on the Chase Lite portal. There's obviously various other screens that give data in response to other questions as well. The overall feeling is that it has been really encouraging. As you can see on that top graph, that red bar is us. So over the sort of total loyalty score, our ranking is 8th out of the 45 charities. Those are either people who have been part of the Chase Index about loyalty, have done primarily with bigger charities, and also the 5 pilot charities that were involved, that have been involved in Chase Lite. So it was just really reassuring that actually our supporters are saying that they are as loyal as we hoped and thought they were. But it's really nice to have the data to back up some of that. If you go on to the next slide now, please. So the headline was, it was good news. And the data showed behind that ranking of 8th, that actually out of those 45 charities, we ranked number 1 in relation to trust specifically. So that was incredible news. I've been reflecting since that it takes a long time to gain trust and grow trust. It's very easy to lose trust, so that's something that we need to be very careful about. Make sure we don't score our own goals and never take the trust that supporters have in us for granted as well. Some of the other stats also showed that we ranked really well for people who intend to leave a legacy. It's probably quite safe to say that those trust scores correlate quite closely with those who intend to give a legacy. So it's nice to see that the result of that, and it also gives us confidence about the long-term sustainability of the charity as well. Those were some nice things. There is obviously room for improvement as well. So for those other key factors that Roger's talking about in terms of commitment and satisfaction, we didn't score nearly as highly as we did for trust. I think we were just about above average on both of those. So that shows that in how we develop our supporter journeys from this point onwards, we need to make that experience of being an INF supporter even more fulfilling, and that's the sort of messaging that we will need to highlight and to go into our planning in the short term and medium term as well. But I think one of the bits of general good news for today is that it shows that we can make the most of being a small and rather niche international development charity and use that as a benefit. And we need to view our size as a strength instead of us seeing it as something that limits us, or even falling into the trap of using that as an excuse for things that we can't do. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So what happens next? We've only had the results quite recently, so we're still very much digesting them and working out what that really means and what plans that we can make as a result. So it's definitely not the end of the story, it's the start of the story in many ways. We will always be a work in progress. We know that there are things we need to improve on, and now we've got a bit more direction about the specific areas that are more important to improve on than others. And I think it's important to say with the audience today that as a smaller charity, you'll no doubt share my issues around lack of resources, lack of time, lack of money. There's always more we want to do, and there's always more that we can do. So I would just say, be kind to yourself. Take things one step at a time. We don't have the resources that the big charities can throw at campaigns. But we can make steps to learn more about our supporters, to reflect on what we find, put some plans into action, and then move forward in that way. And I'd say that to close, that I think that the Chase Lite results have certainly encouraged me that being a small charity can indeed be our superpower. Thank you very much. That's all from me. Back to Richard.
Oh, thanks so much, Ollie. Such a lot in there. Brilliant. The things I draw out. I really like the mix, the way you talk about the mix of quantitative and qualitative research. And actually, often we find that smaller charities will back away sometimes from the quantitative research because there might not be considered the volume or the significance, or but actually what you've shown here is that it can really work. And the other thing is that actually, yes, as Roger was saying at the start, we know that it's right to give people a great experience, but actually one of the challenges is knowing what's the most efficient way of doing that, because you can throw the kitchen sink, in theory you could throw the kitchen sink at it, but resources are limited, time is limited, and actually if you can just be focused in, as you were saying, Ollie, focused in on the things that you know are going to make the difference. So for you, that's commitment and satisfaction. If you're able to do that, if you're able to quickly and easily take that measure, identify those things, it could save a huge amount of time and effort, and you can know you're focusing in on the right things. So yeah, I think it's some really great stuff there. Thank you very much, Ollie. We're going to hold, if anybody's got any questions for Ollie, pop them in the chat, pop them in the Q&A, and we'll collect those as we go along. And we'll have a chance at the end to ask some questions. But I'm just going to hand it back to Roger now to tell, because Ollie's talked a little bit about Chase Lite, and Roger talked about Chase Lite, but we're just going to explain a little bit more about what that actually is, so that it's removes some of the mystery. So thanks again, Ollie, absolutely brilliant, and back to you, Roger.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me, thank you, Ollie, for that, and really great to see the practical application and the practical aspects of what you're doing. And I love the idea of being small being your superpower. I'm going to really talk about a lot of this is talk about sort of the concept of measurement, and I want to answer the question of sort of why measure loyalty. And it comes from, for us, we have a vision about loyalty here, that every charity measures its supporters' loyalty, and then every charity takes action to grow it, because there's no point in measuring something unless you're going to use it to actually create change off the back of it. And so why is it important to measure something? I often think back to oh gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago, but the years before COVID. And I was at a conference, and some of you will know Robin Peake was speaking there, and there must have been 100, 150 people in the room. And he asked the question, how many of you have a target for how quickly you thank your supporters? And he said, put your hand up if you do. And most people in the room put their hand up. He then said, how many of you actually measure it? Actually measure it and create a report each day or each week of how many days it's taken to send a thank you letter out. And more than half the hands went down in the room. And he made the point there that if you've got a target, there's no point in having a target unless you're actually going to measure it. The point being that when you measure something, that's when you start to change it. But not only do you change it, it changes you. And I think that's a really important point, that it changes you, and it changes what you do, and it changes what you prioritize, and it changes the way you make decisions when you have a measure that's being reported on. So we think there's 4 reasons why it's important to measure loyalty in this context. And the first is that it's about your culture. It's about having a culture that is driven by insight, by understanding, by knowledge, by science. So it's how are your decisions made as an organization, and having those measures, a range of measures, of which we believe loyalty should be one of them, is at the core for that. The second reason we think measuring loyalty is important is, I've already shown you, that growth in loyalty leads to income. But if you don't measure it, you can't know that. So if you want to make a business case of why it's important to invest money or time those two scarce resources that is scarce for everybody, then you need a reason for doing it, and having some way of judging and evaluating and showing the impact is important to do that. The third reason is that, and this is what Ollie's just been talking about really clearly, you need to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. Ollie was talking about the fact they now know they're very strong in trust, and that they've got really good trust in the supporters, but lower in commitment and satisfaction. So in terms of prioritizing and looking at where to change, then that's where Ollie's going to prioritize his scarce resources. And then, of course, having targeted that, having made the interventions, it's important to know if you've been successful, and it's important to know what is successful. If you try different things, it's about learning. Like everything we do, we measure other things. We need to know what's working and what doesn't work, so that we know how to be more effective going forwards. So we believe, as I say, we have a vision that every charity will be measuring its loyalty in one way or another to do that, and then taking action on the back of it. We're today launching Chase Lite. I mentioned this earlier, which has been designed. It's based on our research of the last nearly 10 years. It's based on research, as I say, with about 340,000 supporters, but it's designed specifically for smaller charities that don't have the big audiences, the big segments, the big mass programs, and don't have the big resources to be able to do something in the sort of the breadth that is required of the larger charities. It's designed to be a much simpler and much quicker tool to use for smaller charities. So I'm going to finish just with saying, with a few slides here just to bring it to life. Ollie showed you a chart which had him highlighted much higher up here. At the heart of Chase Lite is the ability to measure, and one of the things, as Ollie mentioned, is the ability then to benchmark. You can benchmark against other charities and see how you perform against, how your scores are compared to other charities. Because if I tell you you're 5.66, it means nothing. But if I tell you 5.66 and this is how it compares to other charities, it means a lot more. And not only measure now against other charities, but over time you can then come back and see how you move with that. You can see where your strengths are. And again, Ollie showed you some very different pictures with sort of trust right up here. But you can see the relative strengths, the relative weaknesses, and where to prioritize and target. And you can break it down. This is broken down by gender, you can break it by age, you can break it down by size of charity, things like that. There are different ways of breaking it down in there. Everything is accessed via a portal. So your scores and insights are loaded into a portal. You can log in, access your scores whenever you want to, and cut it in the way that's important to you. So that's really all I want to mention about Chase Lite. I think the more important part of today is the concepts of what is loyalty, the importance of small charities that Alex has talked about, and that the issues you're facing, and then the ideas of how, from Ollie, about how they're using it at INF. And there. If you are interested in knowing more about Chase Lite, give myself or Richard or Amy, who's also going to be joining us in a second, get in touch. We'll talk to you about it. We'd love to talk to you more about it. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand back to Richard, and we have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you, Roger. Yes, we have a few questions, in fact. So if you'd like to, yeah, brilliant. We've got Alex and Ollie have come back. Fantastic. So actually, I've got a question first for Ollie. So shall I read this out to you? It says, Ollie, you talked about proactively receiving both qualitative and quantitative feedback. Do you have anything in place to share these insights across the organisation? And follow on from there, is there good buy-in across the organisation for letting these insights influence decision making? So it's really like about that, how those insights work for you.
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the start, we're a relatively small team. We work closely together on everything. I think one of the benefits of being a small organization is there's nothing any of us are doing which is a surprise or a mystery to the rest of us. It's not where you've got the danger of kind of siloed teams that are going off and doing their own thing and the rest of the organization doesn't know what's going on, which is, you know, a risk of bigger charities. So fortunately we don't have that barrier particularly. So we don't need or have particularly kind of complex processes to kind of to share that feedback, but it is done to make sure that that those of us at kind of manager level within the organisation can understand our supporters and those people who are involved in other aspects of fundraising or involved in we've got a staff member who monitors the projects and programs that we fund out in the pool, that we've all got a shared understanding of actually what a supporter base is saying to us, and you know, things like that. That example of the new donor who I emailed and got feedback from her, that would just be shared in our kind of weekly staff team update so that people are aware of that sort of thing happening as well.
So it's true, isn't it? When there's a smaller organisation, it's so much easier for those ideas to kind of cross-fertilise, to be part of how you work, how you operate. Yeah, thank you, Ollie. Alex, you have a question for Ollie?
Oh yeah, I do. Thank you. I mean, it was great to hear both about Chase Loyalty from Roger, but also the application from Ollie. Ollie, two questions, if it was okay to you. One was, you talked about the kind of the challenge of being small with 7 staff members. When you were thinking about wanting to understand more about kind of your supporters and what their thoughts were, what are some of the trade-offs that you make in making sure that that's proportionate to time and resources that you have? And then with all that information, what do you do with that learning? Or what do you hope to do with that learning in the future as you use the tool more?
So I'll answer the second one first. That's very much that's now my thing to focus on. So we got the we had the results from the pilot of Chase Lite last week, was it? So now we are, and I've got a session with About Loyalty tomorrow, where we'll be looking at our sort of specific response to some of that and how we can put plans into action. But I'd say, you know, some of my kind of initial thoughts have kind of spilled out a bit in my presentation, is that one of the good things that it frees us up to, because we know we scored so well for trust, actually it means we are not going to waste time and effort trying to think that we have to get the trust of our supporters up more, and we can actually, so we can direct our in what we're saying and how we're saying it, and then the kind of processes and the supporter journeys that I was talking about, that we can focus on improving them so that our satisfaction score might go up. But we don't have to come up with ideas to try and increase trust necessarily, because we know we're already scoring comparatively well on that. So that was a long answer to your second question. What was the first question you asked?
Just when you're a small organization and you might have kind of big ambitions about wanting to have lots of data and lots of information and lots of kind of understanding, how do you keep that proportionate, essentially?
I mean, I know that About Loyalty are here, and I'm not just here to sing their praises, but that's actually where they come into play from our point of view. I had an initial chat with Richard, having heard him talk at another event, and basically said, look, we're a small organisation, we don't have much money, I don't really know where to start or how to kind of how to best go about this. We want to find out some more. We probably want to do some sort of supporter survey, but you know, and then I was thinking of all these things we want to include in it, and it would have been way too complicated. Anyway, then Richard came back and said we're actually looking at piloting this thing called Chase Lite, and essentially it's basically a 3-question survey with a few extras that we include in the pilot for some respondents. And but because it feeds into the data and the research they've done over years, and we know that actually, you know, they've done the hard work over the past 10 years to say that the commitment, satisfaction and trust are the key things that can give you its loyalty score, meant that actually we didn't have to do anything more complicated than that, and that gives us a start. We might do, you know, a follow-up supporter survey ourselves, asking some other questions. Obviously the Chase Lite stuff is all anonymous. If there are things that we want to get some specific invites for from supporters, we can do that stuff ourselves further down the line, but we've got a starting point and we build from what we know and where we are now, really.
Excellent. I have one more point. There's some more questions, but we want to be respectful to people's time. But I have one more point, which is that some of you may be thinking, because Ollie's saying, oh yeah, our loyalty was really good and we're top #1 for trust. Some of you might be thinking, actually that's because it's a small charity. Do small charities always get the highest trust scores, always get the highest loyalty scores? But it's not the case. We actually had quite a spread looking at the smaller charities, so it's not just something that correlates with size. So I think Ollie's in a really strong position, and I'm sure you can see why, because Ollie's obviously incredibly good at what he does. So yeah, so if you do want to know more about your supporter loyalty and where you might sit on that commitment, satisfaction, and trust, and where to focus your efforts, then please do get in touch with us. Please do contact Roger or myself or Amy, and we'll be really happy to have further conversations with you about helping you grow your supporter loyalty. Alex has had to go. He's just about to go, I think, but anyway, so we can say a really big thank you to Alex. Thank you, Alex. Big round of applause for Alex, and a big shout out for Small Charity Week and everything that NCBO is doing for Small Charity Week. Absolutely brilliant. We're really, really privileged to be able to be part of that. So thank you. Big thank you to Ollie Ducrow from INF and just sharing what you've been doing there, and for your support for what the work we're doing with you as well, and helping you measure loyalties. It's really nice, you know. It's really good to hear that we're bringing value to you. So and a big thank you, of course, to Roger, who, as I've said before, he is the guru on all things loyalty. Anything worth knowing, Roger knows it. So thank you all again. And I hope to see you all very soon. You'll be able to download this webinar. We'll circulate the recording, circulate the slides. You can have a good think, but as I say, if you have any questions or you want to find out more, please do get in touch with us. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Richard.